You're all going to die down here.
So, just to be clear, the term mascot horror has a tendency to be controversial because it elicits a range of interpretations. For some, mascot horror is just that, horror centered around a specific icon that in many cases become more popular than their respective franchises. In that you can include the greats like Freddy Krueger or Jason Voorhees. But for others, mascot horror is much more specific. It's horror that is focused on an antagonist or group of antagonists that initially seem innocent because they're in many cases related to some sort of children's entertainment or attraction, i.e. arguably the originator of the genre itself, Freddy Fazbear of the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. This is the definition that I go by. There of course are some nuances that exist between the two definitions, but I wanted to be clear with what I'm referring to going forward. So I probably have a rather different perspective as to why I enjoy mascot horror. But as a millennial in her 30s that came of age in the 90s and the 2000s, I love these games because they take me back to an era that I witnessed and was a part of in real time. That doesn't mean that I think everything is amazing, but as a big nostalgia nerd, there are aspects of the genre like its usage of analog technology, found footage, and types of children's entertainment that just aren't as big of a thing as they were when I was growing up that makes these games quasi-time capsules in a way for me. Even details down to the aesthetic choices capture my attention. Again, I'm a nostalgia nerd, and with that I even study the architecture and product design of my youth as a hobby. Because I remember when the world actually looked like this, I appreciate details in these games that I assume most people just don't care about. Not that you don't notice, but it's not that deep unless you have that specific interest like myself. Now, mascot horror does have its problems, usually stemming from intentionally tapping into a fickle demographic that will evolve over time. As that audience matures, their interests might as well. So the developers have to grasp and maintain the attention of its target audience while churning as much revenue while it can. In comes the merch, the influx of social media content, the movie deals, etc. This all results in these games having the not too favorable reputation of being obvious cash grabs that lack in substance and quality. Even though this business model is very noticeable and easy to figure out, because I'm usually viewing these games from the lens of nostalgia first, I can just appreciate the charm of their concepts while immersing myself in their worlds, versus being very critical of their overall storytelling. Although there are some amazing titles that balance both nostalgia and lore perfectly, one of my go-to examples and personal favorites being Amanda the Adventurer. And glitches aside, and this may be considered blasphemy, FNAF Security Breach is a very fun game, if for no other reason than to roam the Pizzaplex and remember the countless birthday parties and random weekend outings to places like this. As a kid whose parents allowed me to not just indulge in horror media whenever I wanted, but introduced me to the genre in the first place by taking me to the movies with them or even allowing me to watch while they played survival horror classics on the OG PlayStation, mascot horror games are titles that I know for a fact I would have loved back then. They in a way remind me of the computer games that I would play every night, or rather they feel like they would have been the computer games that I would have played. There was an era in the 90s and early 2000s where horror dominated in children's entertainment. Courage the Cowardly Dog, Nightmare Ned, Are You Afraid of the Dark, Goosebumps, and even early CGI was over-exaggerated and disturbing. So even though a central component of mascot horror is the homage that it pays to this bygone era, instead of being nostalgia-based, I think that a lot of these titles would have naturally fit in fine with the horror-oriented children's media of that era. But those are the reasons that I love mascot horror. They're fun and they shoot me back to a nostalgic time in my life. Because I approach these games with this very specific use case, I'm not super nitpicky about certain details that cause many of these games to not be taken seriously.